Well, in King Charles's case, it was his first time, but
Right.
third time since 1977 in Canadian history, where we had a monarch to visit and give the throne room speech
Hmm.
to open up the 45th Parliament,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And so on the Quebec side, the Quebec Liberals are having a leadership race. Okay, there's five candidates. The five men are vying to be the next leader, and then the next premier of Quebec at next year's provincial election. One of the interesting things that happened literally that same day, which was all over the news, and we're going to talk about it today, is how basically the Parti Québécois leader Plamondon, alongside with Québec Solidaire, proposed a motion to cut all ties of from the monarchy when dealing with the Quebec state, or the Quebec nation, I should say, if we want a literal translation from French. So
Hmm.
let's
Hmm.
remember in December 2022, a law was literally adopted, and this was not just a resolution, okay, that made the oath of any MNA optional,
Hmm.
right?
Optional.
And it
Yeah.
actually passed through with
Not
success
legal,
on
but
the Parti Québécois
yeah.
side, who did take a
Right.
stand and refuse to take the oath to the head of
Sure.
state, who is still King Charles. Quebec Solidaire at the time went much, much further and I would say extreme. And they also
Mm.
said, let's put an end for Quebec to stop funding the lieutenant governor. So the lieutenant governor is the crowned representative on the provincial level. Okay.
They also went so far as to call the royal family a parasite, which is
Oh,
another
yeah.
story from Quebec
Yeah.
Solidaire.
So let's just remember that even though they proposed to stop funding, the salary of the lieutenant governor has always been and continues to be paid by the federal government. And
Right.
what's really interesting is on the day of the king's visit to make, you know, to demonstrate
Yeah.
national unity throughout the country and to take a real
Yeah.
stand against, let's face it, the constant threats of Donald Trump. What do
Yes.
we do here in Quebec in terms of the legislature? Well, we had quite a surprise hurrah, I would say.
Mm.
I would argue it not in a good way either. Basically, there was a motion among the 106 members of the National Assembly that were present, because usually there's
Yeah.
125 seats in Quebec. They all
Yeah.
unanimously voted in favor of this, cutting all ties
Yes.
of the Quebec state from the monarchy. So, what are your two
Yes.
thoughts about this?
The first thought is what, and then the second thought is complete bluster. Let's face it, Quebec, whether it likes it or not, has a Westminster system, and this Westminster system, along with the legal system, even though it's the codified law opposed to the common law, has a boss, and the cork in that, like as I mentioned in another segment, in that bottle is the crown. There is two things I want to make clear about that as well, because there was once a very famous phrase that was going around that we're something, get used to it. So until we change that something and something, they're gonna have to just simply get used to it. Now, why is this important? Well, I find it important because I find it a little disingenuous, to say it lightly. We have a constitutional monarchy. The constitutional monarchy works. It is an integral part of all of our provinces, and including the federal government. And in the moment where the king has made a presence in the country to read the speech from the throne, they found it opportune to make not a political statement, because I would call this an opinionated statement over what they think of the monarchy. I don't mind them making these sort of statements, but when you make it on the day that the king's visit, at such a high moment of our national identity and sovereignty, I could go on forever talking about it. But what it comes down to is simple bad
I
taste.
Yeah, that I would say it's very well timed, or probably it's the opportune time, right? Just like having an election federally. So here is exactly what Paul St-Pierre Plamondon, the Parti Québécois leader, who's leading in the polls at the moment, by the way, said to reporters. Carney's best card is Charles III, a monarch from another country based on a colonial tradition that is oppressive to Francophones and First Nations. He
Wow.
added, "It's out there, it's so
Wow.
abnormal, and of course, from a Quebec standpoint, it's not acceptable. If you think or anyone else here thinks that Donald Trump will stop saying things that are either random or hostile to Canada because Charles III was giving a speech today, I don't know what game you're playing right now. It just does not make sense." Interestingly enough,
First,
let me just add one more
yeah.
point. The Quebec Liberal Party's interim leader, Marc Tanguay, said he's not a fan of the monarchy either, but he also noted that abolishing the post of lieutenant governor requires a constitutional amendment, which is no small order. And he said, quote, "When I wake up in the morning, I'm not thinking about King Charles III. My
Exactly.
allegiance is to the people of Quebec."
Okay.
End of quote.
Uh,
So, is anyone right? Do you agree at all with
well,
what
Plamondon
one
is
of
gonna.
these party leaders said?
I think it's just the classic. I mean, it sounds like he's an individual who clearly doesn't know history and clearly doesn't know what he's talking about, and finds himself with a handful of spaghetti throwing at a wall or a ceiling or a fan and see what sticks. Now, why do I mean by that? Because didn't you find it rich how they're saying that the monarchy doesn't represent anything about our culture or our constitutional responsibilities. And when it comes to the Indigenous people, first of all, if he knew anything about Indigenous history, he would know if he should have a conversation with any of the chiefs in any of our territories. Excuse me, I'm talking right across the country, that their conditions and their treaties are with the crown and it is sacred. So that's not something that he should talk about lightly. Further to that, if he wants to talk about independence, because as it's still part of the Parti Québécois platform, in which they're talking about taking Quebec out of the Canadian Constitution, and yet still talking about the old colonial system of the monarchy within Canada, and on the same breath they're talking about taking out the Indigenous people or bringing them along into this new independent Quebec without their consultation. He's got something coming, because one thing I do know, if the Cree of James Bay and the Ganasataki and the Mohawks of the Haudenosaunee, the first thing they're going to say is, hold on a second, I didn't vote to separate. So, all in all, I find his statement rich.
Well, I also find we're talking about you're talking about Plamondon, by the way, the Parti Québécois leader's
Parti
statement.
Québécois, that's right, correct.
Yeah. So just to add to that, so I find it very rich, by the way, from Plamondon, since literally most of his policies would, in fact, be based on colonial traditions. I might add,
No kidding.
right? So
100%.
So one of the interesting things that I've noticed is Marc Tanguay's statement, the current interim leader of the Quebec Liberals. Um, and by the way, I did work for the party in the past, and I do think that this caucus, 19 of them in fact, is full of people who are quite qualified, and I actually do like them, right, on a personal level.
Okay.
Now, putting my analyst hat on, the statement of Marc Tanguay is like, okay, so I'm not for it, but I'm also not against it. But yet, 19 Quebec Liberals are MNAs in this
Yes.
National Assembly. 16 of them were present for the vote,
Yes.
with the exception of, and I have the list over here open, and
Yeah.
I'll share the screen too
hmm
for folks. So three of them that did not partake in this vote are Marois Risky and Madoua Kadé. Both of them are on maternity leave, so
Okay. Yeah.
they were not present for obvious reasons. And
Yeah.
Benjamin France. So these were the three that were not present for this vote.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, why did they all have to vote unanimously rather than abstain, even though they know it's already going to pass, let's say?
Yeah.
Why actually fall into the trap set by the opposition leaders in terms of strategy?
One hundred
Or do you
percent.
think, yeah, or do you think that Marc Tanguay and the Quebec Liberals actually went along with this because there's more important things to worry about, rather than take a stand and not protect francophones in Quebec and Quebecers in general?
There's two ways you can look at this. One, it makes absolutely no difference on any legal standing, or will change anything in the future from a standpoint of procedure. Okay, so vote for it, not vote for it. You could look at it and say, who cares? The second part is you could look at it from another point of view and say, wait a minute, you're the only Federalist Party left that is part of your platform to be Federalist, and you're not even abstaining. Well, if that doesn't say you're lacking in the courage department, then I don't know what does. So you're either taking this not seriously, which you should say that, or you are taking this seriously, at which point I'd say, what kind of a Federalist Party are you then? What are you Federalist for? We are a constitutional monarchy in a federally constituted system, of which you are a supporter for until it goes up to the crown. It's confusing.